How can you make yourself attractive to insurance carriers? That may not be a question that preoccupies your mind on most days, but it is a question that you should be asking yourself. And it's one that my guest and I today discuss on Construction Genius. Welcome to the show. This is Eric, and my guest is Mary Grandy. She is the Senior Vice President of Business Insurance at Epic Insurance Brokers and Consultants. She is an industry veteran in terms of working in insurance and with construction companies. And so she has a number of extremely important insights that you can consider to help you to deal with this whole issue of how much money you're spending on insurance. The fact is the insurance markets at the moment are hard, to say the least. And so therefore prices are rising. And you need to think about the strategies you're employing to mitigate the amount of money you're spending on insurance. And that's what Mary and I discuss. I know you'll find the show episode very useful and helpful. Feel free to share it with other people and enjoy my discussion with Mary. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Mary, thank you for joining us on Construction Genius here today.
Thanks for having me.
You've been in the business now for over 20 years, and you're seeing something in the insurance market as it relates to construction that you've never seen before. Can you tell me about that?
We're seeing a hardening market, specifically in the excess marketplace. We've been seeing double-digit increases over the last 8 quarters straight. And it's an industry, it's not industry specific, but construction is carrying a lot of the pain.
Okay. Why is that? Why is this hardening occurring?
There's several socioeconomic patterns, social verdicts that are happening. You're getting nuclear verdicts with respect to losses. We're seeing greater losses. I started my career in auto litigated claims, and claims that I used to settle back, 15 years ago for $2 million are now settling in the $15 million range. Right. And the excess carriers are seeing losses grow and continue to grow. And historically, it's been priced. They weren't actuarially priced the way they should have been, and they're trying to get some of that premium back. Okay, so you recently wrote an article, and it was in the AGC magazine. Is that right? Right. Yeah, I'm going to link to that article in the show notes because I think it's a very good one. It's very succinct. But you use the term social inflation in that article. Tell me what you mean by social inflation. Social inflation is what social media is doing to drive the increase on what people think claims are valued at. So, the perception of the people is that juries are awarding more dollars. They think, a broken arm is worth way more than it used to be. And they're wanting to hold companies more accountable in ways that don't make sense. Another thing driving, you have, the Me Too movement, things like the Me Too movement, California wildfires, in instances where carriers hadn't historically been brought in before. You wouldn't think of a California wildfire impacting an excess liability policy unless a business happened to be nearby that fire or it happened on their premises. And so therefore people are trying to get money for anything nowadays. So it's interesting because you're talking about, social media, you're talking about wildfires, the Me Too movement, and I'm a construction CEO, and I'm like, what does that got to do with me? I just want to build a project on time and profitably, and keep my guys safe and all that kind of stuff. So again, just be crystal clear. What does that have to do with the insurance rates that I'm paying as a construction company owner? The insurance industry as a whole is trying to correct that ship. The construction industry is a higher risk that they view, right? So they're building these projects. What if the project burns down? what, something happens within the project and it burns down. From a builder's risk perspective, the course of construction policy, if it's a wood frame building, especially even in the Bay Area, we have carriers that are no longer willing to write those projects because of all the fires and the arsons happening. And so construction is taking a hit because of a risk from an injury standpoint. It's historically been a risk. If they have a large fleet of vehicles, and the auto market is also significantly driving the excess market because the carriers are seeing a higher frequency, but also, again, a higher severity of what those claims are settling for. And so construction industry has all of the components built in that just makes it this risk that carriers have to either price for or aren't interested in writing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So in other words, these factors that perhaps in and of themselves are indirect to the industry, they come together and directly then impact the insurance rates that a construction company has to pay. And as a result of that, the insurance rates are going up, and that's having a massive impact on the industry.
It is, because a lot of contractors aren't aware. Not everyone is shouting from the rooftops, the market's hardening. I feel like I've been Chicken Little the last couple of years, just warning everybody, because they need to be prepared going in. They need to build a buffer into their future projects that they're bidding, and they need to know what to expect, because contractors are bidding projects 6 months, a year out, and if their policy is renewing next month and they didn't plan for it, they're already losing money on that project.
Okay, so that's excellent. And I really want to get into that, because that is one very practical thing that contractors can do. Obviously, in a competitive marketplace, people are looking to cut their numbers in various different ways, perhaps at times. But what you're saying is that you have to go into a bid with open eyes, understanding that the market 6 months from now in terms of insurance is going to be different than the market today. So let's really dive into that. You're sitting down with a contractor, maybe you're having a glass of wine or something like that, and just having a good chat about their business. What are the 3 or 4 pieces of advice you're going to give to a contractor to help them to address the challenges they face with these insurance premiums?
I would suggest maybe they look at taking on a higher retention or deductible. That can help offset the cost. Depending with the excess market, if a contractor can get their auto limit to maybe $2 million, so that way the excess carrier isn't dropping down, but it depends on losses if a carrier is willing to do that. But sometimes increasing that primary limit will help offset the excess layer. And a lot of contractors right now are investigating the whole captive or alternative risk placement. And what that does is insulate them from what is happening in the marketplace. And truly, you're in those alternative risk programs, you're taking control of your own risk. And so it's the total cost of risk that they need to be looking at. And quite often contractors are looking at the number, the dollar. And so they need to not lose sight of the total cost of risk. Maybe put equipment in the vehicles, right, to make them safer. And that can help save money on auto premiums.
Okay, so let's talk about that one phrase, total cost of risk. How do you define that specifically? Give us a real clear definition of that, please.
Insurance is just a funding mechanism, right? So in risk management, when you look at your insurance program, insurance is part of it. The total cost of risk is the overall operations and what risk you're willing as a business owner to take on yourself.
Right. Okay.
And so insurance is a part of that, but what other programs are you willing to put in place to maximize that total cost of risk?
Okay, so let's talk about that then. What programs then can a contractor focus on in order to address that total cost of risk? What are some recommendations that you have?
I would say your safety and loss control.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure your employees get home safe is always key. And I know that's important for contractors. They've remained essential through all of this COVID and have been working under very tight time constraints, but focusing on your safety and loss control is an immediate, reviewing contracts and making sure that there are There are no insurance provisions that maybe your subcontractors or trade contractors aren't able to protect you with, and making sure you're transferring your risk properly if the contract's written well.
Okay. Earlier, when you were talking about the primary limits and then the excess layer, it sounded like what you were saying is that initially a contractor should be looking at their primary limits and doing their best to get those raised. Did I hear that correctly?
If you can. Not every carrier is willing to offer $2 million on an auto liability. Some carriers can do a $2 million, $4 million on the general liability, but really it's the auto that's driving that first layer. So not all carriers can offer that. I can tell you that a monoline auto liability, auto policy is rare in California right now, which just means that a carrier just writes the auto. There's not many carriers that even offer that. So it is getting to be more of a challenge with contractors as far as having options. So, if you can increase, if your fleet is sizable enough and your loss ratio is good, it can offset the cost if you can increase the limit to 2 million. Not all carriers are able to do so.
In your experience working with contractors, at what point does a construction company dedicate a person to addressing these types of issues?
Do you mean at what size of the company?
Yeah, at what size? Yeah. What do you see? At what point? Because, perhaps I'm listening to this. I understand what you're saying. These things are not new to me. But then the question then is, well, what can I do about them? Because I might, have an effort to put safety in place and to look at that. I may be, diligently pursuing for a time, reducing my costs or spreading out my risks in terms of insurance. But at what point does someone say, okay, Dave, you're our insurance guy internally that's going to be interfacing with the insurance companies and developing those relationships to manage this particular part of our business?
I think it depends on the mentality of the contractor, because there are so we quite often deal with the finance team and someone within that team. Companies sometimes will hire risk managers internally to manage all of that for them. A lot of the larger ones have that built in. Quite often it falls either within the finance team or HR team.
Right. So in your experience, let's say, when should I get that risk manager in place internally? In your experience, when is the best time to do that, to really dedicate someone to that?
I think if the owner has been so busy not keeping their finger on the pulse, that's when it's time to delegate it to someone who can. As a construction business owner, you're wearing a lot of hats. You're out you're building the relationships, you're managing all these things, you're growing the business. At the point where the owner cannot keep their finger on the pulse, that's when it's time to bring someone in who will. If that's someone on the finance team, that's fine. I work quite often with the finance and the owner for the day-to-day stuff, finance, but the owner still has their finger on the pulse. So I don't think it's a size requirement. It's more of a function of the business.
Okay. So then let's pursue another aspect of this here. When you were talking about the looking to get your primary limit raised and then thinking about the excess layer, I immediately began to think about the responsibility that a construction company owner has to develop relationships with people in the insurance industry and perhaps with more than one company. Did I hear that right? Help me with that a little bit.
Well, as far as partnership, they're out building relationships with their customers, as well as, the insurance industry is I'm not selling a light bulb, right? I'm selling a guarantee product that's going to respond when their worst day happens. Right. And so it's an intangible. It's truly a partnership, like your legal counsel, your surety placement, and your CPA, right? We're all a partnership and in this for the same ultimate vision to help the company grow and succeed.
Okay. That's great. Now, tell me from your perspective, again, you've been in the business for so long, what is the difference between a good construction partner and a bad construction partner?
I almost said my honest opinion.
Yeah, come on, hit us with the honesty. Because the reason I'm asking you, Mary, is so that the people who are listening to this can understand from your perspective, because they have to get insurance, right? So from your perspective as an insurance professional, what makes a construction partner good and what makes a construction partner bad? Please give us something on that if you could.
Okay. So I always say, so my background's litigated claims, right? So I've seen the worst case of every scenario. And when you have the right partner looking out for your operations, it is someone that's willing to say that's not how it works, or that's not the right product for you. Selling for the sake of selling.
Hold on. So you're saying the insurance agent or the insurance party is willing to tell the truth to the construction company?
Yeah, it has to be that way.
Okay.
You because contractors are really good at what they do, at building things, right? But they don't necessarily, and especially if it's a contractor that's never had a claim, that they go, oh, that'll never happen. I can't get sued for that. I can't tell you how many times I say, you can get sued for anything. It's whether or not you're covered. That's important. My job is to make sure wherever possible, they're covered.
Right.
And so having the right partner, I always say to people, there is no right price for the wrong product. Okay. Right. So if you have a contractor that is, and I discovered it was a custom pool installer that had a residential exclusion on their general liability policy that essentially excluded all of the work that they do, custom pools in homes with a residential exclusion.
Right.
And so a lot of contractors will tend to go based on price because they bid their projects, right? Their projects are based on price, but there's no right price for the wrong product.
Right.
So building that relationship is important, and building a level of trust. And I've, quite frequently told my clients, you can't do that.
What do you mean?
Let's say they want
to do something, and you're saying from an insurance perspective, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then let me ask you this question. What is the most effective way for a construction company and an insurance carrier, a broker, to build trust? Tell us about that.
I think it starts at the ground level, right? People do business with people they like, right? Yeah. So I built my book of business based on relationships. I'm part of CFMA, AGC, been part of region business for years, and I'm part of the industry, right? I get so much industry intelligence from attending those meetings and being active on the board and learning from the contractors. Yeah. I think it's important to know, to partner with someone who understands the industry. Yep. And understands your operations and what makes your company different. Right. One can't say, oh, I write 3 different general contractors, so I should write your business. It means I know you. It's a trust level. We're not selling light bulbs, a flashy object that has to be replaced and you constantly need replenishing. We're selling, again, that promise. And so there has to be a level of trust, right. And certainly a knowledge base.
So let me ask you this then. That's interesting because what do you do to get to know a specific contractor? I
get to know them.
Tell me more about it.
Does that sound like it sounds like a basic answer to that? But again, I'm part of all these boards and I'm out there talking to people what's important to them. A lot of my accounts have come to me via referral. I've rescued a lot of contractors from brokers who have maybe not paid attention, and so they find themselves uncovered for a claim. And so that's where my networking, my network of colleagues that know me, the CPAs, the lawyers that know me, they'll say, you need to call Mary. Okay. I can't speak to what works for others.
No. So let me ask you, it's interesting because you gave the pool example, right? So this guy's got an insurance policy and the very thing that he does is not covered by the insurance policy. So mm-hmm. You don't have to name names or anything like this, if possible, but can you give me another example, perhaps in the commercial market, where you're brought into an account and for whatever reason, you've got the wrong product at the right price or whatever it is. Give us another story of that and what you did to help fix that.
There was a commercial roofer that had an open roof exclusion on the policy. And how that's defined in the language of the policy was for any reason. And so there had been a claim where water got in and there was, it was tarped, but they were still working, but it rained overnight and they did not have the coverage they needed. And so personally, I argued that, by definition, the roof was not open. And they were hired because there was a leak in the roof. So
Right.
What they had done was not damaging to the roof, and it was therefore not defined as open.
I see. Okay. So then, in other words, what you're looking for in your insurance professional is not just a nice guy or gal, but someone who understands the language of the contracts and the implication that that language has upon the specific projects that the contractor is building.
Yes. And it's important because that the contractor even have a relationship with a carrier, and if at all possible, right? If they have a relationship with the carrier and a wacky claim comes in, you want to know that partnership is there. So contractors will move from year to year to year, based on price. But it's important to have a broker who is knowledgeable about what you're giving up if you move carriers, right? But to know the industry, right? When I tell a client it doesn't work that way or you can't do that, let's find out a way we can. I don't like my contractors to not be able to bid work, right? But I want them to know full disclosure hey, we're going to have a problem with this tract. We need to put together a special program. How do we make it so you can do that project? If a contractor is going, with COVID and stuff, some contractors branched out their operations. Hey, we historically build these types of buildings. We're going to try this now. Okay, well, what do you know about building those? How do we sell you? It's my job to make the client attractive to the carrier as well. Right. So if you have a contractor who has losses and you're trying to find a good market for the best price, sometimes I have to tell their story. Pay no attention to the, $500,000 paid out in auto claims. That's nothing to see here. Here's what we fixed now. Here's what's going to be better.
Okay. So this is really good. In what specific ways can a construction company make themselves attractive to an insurance carrier?
Not have losses is a good start.
Yeah, right.
not treat your auto fleet like it's a bumper cars. But in what ways? Yeah, I think putting the right safety protocols, back to that again, having a proper driver safety manual, driver program, putting the telematics in the vehicles. Telematics is having a huge impact on auto pricing with respect to if a customer doesn't have it versus a customer that does.
Forgive my ignorance here. Telematics, what's that?
So dash cams, the equipment that's in there that will tell them if the vehicle's speeding, if it's going too fast around the corner, all those things. The GPS, they have some really cool technology out there now that is having an impact. I have a couple of clients that, if I send a text, it'll say, sorry, it sends an automatic text that says, sorry, can't text, can't respond, driving, and when they get in, it disables the phone. So anything that contractors can do to mitigate the potential for distracted driving, because that's truly what is driving so many of the claims.
Right. How long does it take, in your experience, to take, let's say you've got an ugly contractor, right? The insurance carrier is looking at the contractor and is like, nah, I don't want to date you. How long does it take a construction company to go from being from ugly to being hot? How long does that take?
It's my job to make them the hottest chick at the prom.
There you
So,
go. Let's go.
so I have to tell the story. So if you have a contractor who's got a problematic loss history, then it's my job to explain what's been implemented and what's going to be different going forward. I had a contractor who in one particular month had 3 significant falls, and the carrier was non-renewing. The workers' comp carrier was non-renewing, and I had to go out and put a lot of lipstick on that pig and explain to all these other carriers why they really wanted this contractor. So I had my loss control guy out there doing fall protection program training, and I had my loss control guy out there walking with the carrier's loss control, talking them through, here's what we're doing different. I have to show and demonstrate that the contractor gets it and they're working to move it. But when you're changing a shift in the culture and the dynamic, it does take time. If there's a couple years in the rearview window where we've had some clean activity, it's easier. But when you're in the midst of a bad hair day, and the carrier's looking at you, it can be a challenge.
Yep. That's very interesting. So it's interesting just what you just described there, Mary, was the role of a broker, not only to understand the language of a contract, not only to be a nice guy or gal, but to actually get stuck in with the contractor on their bad days and help them with that whole process of making them attractive and telling their story to the carrier so that they can do whatever's possible to reduce the amount of money they have to spend on insurance.
Right. Exactly. So I have a client that a carrier declined to quote 3 times on a renewal. And I knew this carrier was the most competitive price in the for this risk. And they declined to quote 3 times, and I wouldn't take no. So short of filing a restraining order against me, I'm sure the carrier finally released a quote and we were able to move coverage there. But it is truly a broker that's going to be your advocate, good, bad, or indifferent. And I get a lot of what if questions, right? And I think it's because of my background in claims where I say, here's what can happen. Right. Because again, if a contractor's not had a loss, and you can have a contractor start a company having worked for one of the larger houses, construction houses, and now they're starting their own company. That's a learning curve, right? They have all the experience in the construction, and I don't know how they come about their estimates and stuff, but me guiding them and saying, yeah, that's kind of not how this works. We want to make sure you're asking your subs for an excess liability or pollution, and here's why. It's my job to be their buffer and their bulldog.
That's interesting. Okay, so their buffer and their bulldog. This is great. So then what's interesting then is at what point do you say to a construction company, listen, I try to make you hot for the prom. I try to be your buffer. I try to bulldog. This ain't working. I'm not a fit for you. At what point how does a company get to that point with you?
I don't ever throw in the towel. So there's always a solution. We're going to find a workaround. It's not always going to be what the contractors want to hear. Right. From a builder's risk standpoint, I just recently, because the property market's, not sexy right now either. But I just recently wrote a 6-month extension on a project policy that was originally written for 3 years. The 6-month extension cost as much as the 3-year policy. And so again, if I'm doing my job and preparing the contractors going, here's what's happening in the market, you need to know. But even then, some of the sticker shock, there's nothing, we can do. We will find a solution. It will be painful sometimes. And that's, I try to tell the clients, even if they're not my clients, I try to prepare them and go, here's what you're going to face. Be ready. Right. Brace yourself, because I'm not great at fast math, but I can tell you it's going to hurt. We're in this together is what I try to guide them through. I only like surprises if there's a birthday cake and party hat. And so they hopefully have listened when I'm delivering the news.
Excellent. Okay. I really appreciate some insights here, Mary. This is really great. as we're wrapping up our discussion here today, what are 3 action items that a contractor can take immediately to address these challenges that they're facing in the current insurance market? And if you're repeating yourself from stuff you've already said, it's totally okay. I just want to make sure that people have clear takeaways.
I think focus on your safety and loss control. That can impact your experience modification and, just those premium dollars right there on the workers' comp. I think if you don't have telematics in your vehicle, install them. That will help from a frequency standpoint.
Yep.
And maybe look at higher retention.
Okay.
Take a different look at the way your program is structured.
Okay.
Right over the last year and a half, we've been delivering news because this is what the market is mandating. So how do we think outside the box of doing it differently? Do we need a higher deductible to save some dollars? Do we carve this piece out? Are we willing to self-insure this piece of the risk?
Mm-hmm.
And, to make this dollar look better? So have that dialogue. Insurance is not a black and white thing.
Right.
It's take a total look at your overall risk.
Right. What kind of pushback do you get from contractors when you mention that idea of higher retention?
Well, a lot of carriers are starting to impose it. So carriers, unemployment practices liability, if someone carried a $15,000 self-insured retention, they're depending on the number of employees that contractor may have, they're upping it to $50,000 on a retention. So sometimes it's not their decision, but okay, if you don't historically have losses, you're insuring for the catastrophic event. So if someone's submitting every little door ding on their auto policy, I would tell them stop it.
Right.
If it's a door ding on your own truck, maybe fix it because it's going to have a longer impact on your premiums down the line. So again, that total cost of what we're willing to absorb to save on the bigger picture for when it's really needed.
Okay. So in other words, don't major in the minor.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Excellent. Well, Mary, I really appreciate your time. You've been very generous. Just so that our audience knows, how can they get a hold of you if they'd like to?
I'm certainly always available on my cell phone, 530-559-3435, or certainly my email, mary.grandy@epicbrokers.com.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to be so bold as to put your email and your cell phone in the show notes.
Okay, so we're writing it on the bathroom wall then.
If that's okay with you.
It's fine. I put it out there. So
okay, beautiful.
I'm quite often people's phone a friend. Again, even if they're not my clients, I've received calls from mediations, asking, hey, the adjuster's saying this, does that make sense? So I don't mind being a phone a friend.
And last question here. We're coming out of the lockdown, and I know you're in California. You're in Sacramento, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so give us a dining recommendation if we're coming to the capital of the world's 5th largest economy, California.
There is an amazing, not well-known restaurant, but it's called Hawks. Have you heard of Hawks off of Douglas?
Hawks.
Uh-huh.
As in the bird?
Yes. And I just discovered it not long ago. And it is amazing. And it's been around for quite a while. I just hadn't known about it. So it's not like one of your more popular establishments. So
Hawks Restaurant in Granite Bay.
Yep.
Beautiful. I am going to put that into the show notes. So if you're in Greater Sacramento, Granite Bay is a little outside of Sacramento, but those of you who are in Sacramento, it's not that far. Hawks Restaurant. That is Mary's recommendation. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time here today, Mary. You've been extremely generous and you've given us some great insights. And I do wish you the best. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private, invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.